Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today, Mabel Experience. I am extremely excited to be hosting this panel about creating career opportunities in quality engineering. The role of software testers is evolving, changing. Quality engineering has become or has been and increasingly becoming more of a diverse field with a variety of career paths. Recognizing those career paths isn't always as obvious to some as it is to others. So we've gathered this great group of panel of experienced, very experienced quality professionals. I always enjoy when companies say, with a combined, experience of such and such years, we have over a century of combined experience on this panel here, including myself. So I'm excited to hear some of the insights that this panel has. So next slide, please. So maybe just to start off, I'd like to say a few words about these panelists because I admire them all so much, but I'd also like to give them the opportunity to introduce themselves in their own words. So today, we're very fortunate to have Marit Puhijärvi, a very prolific blogger, author, poster, feedback fairy extraordinaire, one of my favorites. As I said a few minutes ago before we started the conversation, she's one of the writers in our field who always makes me think. And I'm a better person for it. Susan Marie leads a group called TISCA, it's a Triangle Software Quality Association based out of Raleigh, Durham. Monthly meetups, fantastic group. They run a fantastic conference, always have a great list of speakers. Margie Carmen works with Arch Insurance, one of our customers. Margie has been at this for a very long time. If you look her up on LinkedIn, I was having a little geek fest because one of my favorite first computers was a DEC Alpha, and guess what? Margie was at DEC in the early days. Super cool. Corrine Sully has worked across so many different customer-facing applications, most recently at Slack. So you can imagine the scale that we were having to test with there. Always very interesting to work on products that have just tons of user interactions and whatnot. Laditra Lee, fascinating background as well. Once had top secret security clearances, working in all sorts of different verticals. I met her through our work with Charles Schwab, but Laditra is now working as a CTO in a really exciting nonprofit that I hope we'll get to hear a little bit about too. And me, I'm just Daryl Ferris. I work here at Mabel. I've been here for about 3 years, but I've worked in software production testing for about 20, a little more. But here at Mabel, I manage our team of solutions architects, sales engineers, and we help teams evaluate the product and get to know it and see whether or not it's going to be a good fit for their workflows and make sure that it's going to help them exceed their quality goals as well. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Maybe just starting off with the order of everyone on my screen that I can see. Karine, any hellos, any things you'd like to say to the audience?
Welcome and thank you for having me here. I've as Daryl said, most recently worked at Slack. I built up the quality organization from a team of 3 to a team of 25, and I'm taking a little break right now.
Thanks, Karine. Margie?
Hey everybody, welcome. I've been in the industry a long time, as Daryl alluded to, and I've worked in all the fields, all the roles except for software architect. Most of my experience has been in the New England area, building small teams or startups or working in large established firms. And about 5 years ago, I made the decision to move to the North Carolina area, to Raleigh-Durham RTP, Research Triangle Park. And I lead a team of engineers, QA engineers, BAs and whatnot in this area. And we're dispersed all across the country.
And Susan?
Hi, I'm Susan. I am also based in the Raleigh-Durham area. So I work with a nonprofit organization with a focus on helping testers get better jobs or get better at their job. And sometimes I like to say, get better at your job or get a better job, whichever comes first. And then I've been in quality assurance probably 20 years, working in banks and hospitals and medical devices, and also a little bit of social engineering stuff, which was amusing. We'll say amusing and high volume. So lots of learning opportunities there. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Marit?
25 years, since we're comparing years apparently here. I now work as a principal test engineer. I was an engineering manager at some point. So what I try to do right now is from within as a peer to other developers, I try to introduce better practices that way. So doing the work with others and growing us all.
Thanks, Marit. And Laditra.
Hi, I'm Laditra Lee. I also go by Dee Dee. I've been in the industry for over 20 years. I have stayed in this industry because I love technology. I love people, and I love to help drive them to do things they never thought they would do. As we all know, that technology is in every aspect of our life. So I try to encourage more minorities to go into engineering. So how can I encourage them if I don't stay in engineering? So that's what has here. And I've been working as CTO of Spark Studio, which is a Black female founded company. And we exist to help monetize the work of various artists, people who put out their own films and movies and series. So yeah, you can actually use our platform to monetize your work and have watch parties and such things like that. Prior to that, I worked at Charles Schwab. So I managed and developed a trading application. So as you can imagine, during the pandemic, a lot of people have been using our platform. So a lot of data moves, a lot of going from our on-premise cloud to getting it hosted by Google Cloud, just a number of different changes in different various ways that we've been trying to modernize. So that's me, Dee Dee. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So our topic today is, sort of career pathing and whatnot. And I'm wondering, Margie, could you kind of tell us how you even got into this field in the first place? Like how'd you get your first tech job?
Oh man, it was completely random, I think. I worked as an admin to an engineering group, an engineering QA group for a while, and they created software that developed PC boards. So I've been in the industry for over 40 years. And I remember thinking that what they did was really cool. And one of the engineers said, hey, would you like to learn how to test software? I'm like, yes. So I never turned down what sounded like a good opportunity. I'm like, absolutely. When do we get started? And it was just mentoring, peer-to-peer. I'm very curious by nature. I love to know how things work. Like, oh, how's that work? Well, what happens if I do this? So I'm always asking questions. And that's how it started. It started in 1980, 81. And it was some really cool software. So that's why I tell everybody, you don't need a degree to get into an engineering field, whether it's QA or software engineering. You just have to be curious and say yes to opportunities.
I love that. And Dee Dee, what about you? I'm fascinated by your background because I often see people sort of moving into governmental roles, but from LinkedIn, it looked like you started there. How did that come to be?
Yeah, I actually got my first internship. It was actually a co-op while I was in college, and it was with the National Security Agency. So I did that for 8 months. I really loved it. I really wanted to go there when I graduated from college, but I had already met my husband, soon to be. So he was already here in Austin, Texas, working at IBM. So that's what brought me to Austin, Texas. And we did research. We was like, it's a low crime area, great place to raise a family. A lot of tech jobs here. So that's how I ended up here. But when I started out, I was at Motorola. I was there for about a year. And a little bit after that, I got laid off. And so I went back to school, started on my master's degree. And I actually was in the gym and I was on the elliptical machine and a lady was like, what brings you here at this time of day? And I told her about my layoff and she told me about a open position that her sorority sister had. And it was a great fit for me. We connected right there, called her friend, and I went in for an interview like a couple of weeks later. And that was my first QA job. So that was back in, I think, 2002, February 2002. And that was my first introduction to QA, and I've been there ever since.
I love it. So we have two random conversations were the kind of crux here, right? That got you both in. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Huh.
just like Margie. Yep.
That's fascinating. Mard, what about you? I don't know this about you at all.
Back in high school, I studied the Greek language, so the spoken Greek, modern Greek language. And because of that hobby, someone thought I could read the Greek alphabet. And I ended up testing localized Greek software for Microsoft in Finland, which makes absolutely no sense in hindsight, but I loved the work. And when I then kind of like realized the kind of the agency, the part of just being active and looking at things myself, I've been on that journey and I don't think I will be turning.
Karine, what's your origin story? Oh, I think you're muted.
It's kind of similar. I started out in customer service tech support. Answering calls, was hired to a small startup that didn't have a product and was building out my team. And then they started to have a product and they needed people to test it. And being a curious person, liking to problem solve and to make products better, I started stepping into that role and helping out. And then moved off to a couple other companies in QA. And it's kind of where I am.
And so it goes, right?
Yeah, customer support, release management, project management, any job that needed doing in a small startup, you just kind of step in and you learn so much from it.
Awesome. Susan?
So I don't know if anyone ever grows up and is like, I want to be a QA tester. But I did. I think I'm one of the few people who did. I actually my first career was as a teacher at high school. And then when I realized how little money I would be making in 20 years from that day would be, I sort of thought a little bit harder about that. My brother ahead of me, he's 9 years older than me, was in quality assurance and tests. And I thought, well, what kind of a job is that? And so the first job I had after being a teacher, when I realized that I needed to spend my time and talent doing something else, I was just way too close in age to students. I met with a gentleman that was a former Navy SEAL. I was a scuba instructor in college, and like all of these ladies, I just had a curiosity about things, and I had sort of this logical brain that said, well, what happens if I do this? And I was able to break down where the logic was failing, sort of in this logistics management, where logic was the most important thing, and was able to find some key bugs just by thinking about how I'd be a user of it. And if I'm in that person's shoes, how am I using this? And that's just been the pattern of my career. And like these ladies too, I could also speak to getting to be on camera and getting to do user interviews, things that you just don't get an opportunity to do when you're a software engineer developing code, or other career paths I could have gone down.
Awesome. And in your intro, you mentioned that, now you're helping other people sort of find career paths and opportunities in QA. What, if you could sort of compare and contrast, your beginnings with where you are now, what do you think has sort of enabled that for you?
So I'm a softie at heart, right? So my other identity is a mom, right? I love people and helping people get to better places. And sometimes I have that tool and I feel like it's my right and my responsibility as a person who, as I get older and get more mature into my career, I need to be helping the people around me lift them up and get further as well. We all get better together, kind of an idea. When I think back into my early career, maybe the major themes are in teaching, right? So the assessment of software is a lot like the assessment of a student progress. Like, how good are you doing? How well are you improving? Are we actually getting to the next level? It's not a lot different. You've got the same testing rubrics. You've got an algorithm that you hold a student accountable to, and you say, are they making it through that process? And I think software is sort of similar. Managing people and helping people get to their potential and to their next place is something I'm passionate about.
And Mara, you know, I don't know if you were a teacher, but you certainly are now. I think, you know, whether you like it or not, but what is that like for you, being so visible in the testing community in that way, and knowing that, you know, people like me are looking up to you for advice? How does that feel?
Feels really weird. So I started speaking because I had a huge fear of speaking. Like, I would basically faint if I would have to introduce myself. That's why I started speaking. And then I realized that it was a way for me to manage my social anxiety. So when I get on that stage, I don't have to go and talk to the people. They come and talk to me. But it only worked for a few years, because when you get status, then people think you're busy and you're important, and they no longer talk to you. So somehow there might be many people, but they usually come kind of like in small groups, or, you know, one single person every now and then. And I still approach it as like an opportunity to meet awesome people. So it's great in that sense. But it's funny how sometimes people think that I'm too important and too busy to be talking to others, and that's not true.
I'm starting calendar invites later today. That's great though. I think it's very important, right? To, you know, as we're sort of, you know, thinking about careers and helping, you know, folks elevate themselves, I think it's really important to be accessible to those people and be willing to have those kinds of conversations, right? Didi, you mentioned that, you know, you're kind of working in this capacity now where your mission is to elevate voices and get their content out there. Are there parallels, do you think, in terms of kind of careers and quality versus just sort of self-promotion and self-acknowledgement to kind of build confidence in those regards, so people can take those, you know, those risks in doing things?
Yeah, because I think that in QA, that confidence, making sure that the people you're hiring, the people you're working alongside are very confident about what they're doing, what they're finding, and they don't hesitate on speaking up. You know, we talked about being in QA, you know, and as QA has evolved to where more people are considered software developer, engineer in test, it's, you know, you always have that, are you technical enough? Are you technical enough? And I always tell people, it's, you know, QA knows the most about the product, because we know from a customer's perspective, we're testing the full product from the front end that everybody sees all the way to the back end, versus as a developer, most of them are assigned to developing their particular piece, and they don't really go outside the realm of every aspect of the application. So in QA, and that's why I try to make sure I'm telling, you know, like my team of developers and QA and, you know, business analysts, the main thing you want to make sure you have that confidence in your work and what you're putting forward, because if you don't have that confidence, it's going to come across as though you're not sure. So how can you share with the team that something isn't quite right, or it's a defect, or this could be better, or this is how we can enhance it, if we don't show that we're confident in what we found and how we found it and how we repro it. So yeah, in this whole film industry area that, you know, it's been my first exposure to this, it's, you know, I hired an engineering team, but also to the creators that we have using our platform is being confident in that work, because if you're not confident, then your work is not going to sell, because they're going to see right through it.
Great advice. Margie, I'm wondering, it's you've been a practitioner, manager, you've had all these different roles, and I think that gives you a really unique perspective. I'm wondering, how do you see the role of testers evolving, or the quality assurance in general? How do you see that evolving over time?
I can answer by saying how I've seen it evolve over
Yeah.
time. So it used to be, at least when I started out, what I saw most commonly is you didn't need the programming skills, you didn't need the software engineering skills, it wasn't a requirement because it's mostly manual testing and your job was to test the product as if a user was using it. So that was very different than where we are today. Where we are today, I see QA working hand in hand in partnership, having almost the same skills as a software engineer and even more. So oftentimes people are software engineer QA, but I really see QA equal and then more because they have to know the business side of the users, who's using it and where the industry is going. So you can make, really good recommendations about how you think the product should go. And you have to have the engineering side to say, okay, what's the fastest way I can get this product tested and in the hands of the user? So you really have to have that business side and that engineering mind and that curious mind that says, how can I break this? How can I find holes? And then the user mind that's saying, if I was a user and I didn't know how to use this product, what might I do? If I am a user and I do know how the product, what might I do? So you have to be all these personas in one, in my opinion. And I see that pretty much continuing to go that way. I personally don't like the term when people say, are you technical? I just don't like that question. Are you technical? I'm like, well, what? Because we work with software, we work with our, computers. There's a lot of things we do. So I think, from an industry perspective, that's something we need to stop referring to if we're technical or not technical, because we're all technical. So if they're asking, are you an engineer? Are you a programmer? That's a different question.
Right.
But we're all technical.
Yeah, like I have a computer science degree and I would be like, if I wasn't technical, how did I have a computer science degree? Or how did I work at all these different companies all these years? So to me, it feels like it's more of like a stereotype. And like we talked about the other day, it seems like you see more women that go into QA. And so it's kind of like the whole thing about, the women, the men, are women technical enough for this role?
Or if you don't have a science degree, computer science degree, well, are you technical? If you're not programming anymore, are you technical? And I just think it's a lingo. We just need to stop putting people in the technical, non-technical. Any field in the SDLC is technical. You have to know the business, and to be successful, even as a software engineer, to be really successful, you have to have the business sense, and you have to know how to meet the business needs with technology in the way they want the problem to be solved. So you have to have it all in QA because you're bringing those two bridges together.
I would also still hope that there's also more of this kind of like openness into moving from one technical role to another. There's always the possibility of learning, the one, small slices of technicality. Like there's so many differences here. And one of the things that kind of has made me sad over the years is that I have heard from so many women colleagues in particular that their employers have encouraged them to stay in QA a little bit too much when they wanted to move away from QA into the programmer roles. And some of my favorite architects these days, like they are so good at testing, like so good at programming, so good at testing, and can really kind of bring the whole team together. So we need to allow that kind of movement where people get to try things, and the stereotypes of kind of like this type of person is strong in this one. Like we need to remember that we can be strong in all of those things. Like being strong on one doesn't mean you can't have another one that you will be equally strong in.
Right. I'm wondering if, we've kind of having this experience, and I think we all would self-identify as curious individuals, right? We kind of talked about that before. I'm wondering, and maybe Corinne or Susan, if you could both comment on this. I'm curious if, hiring today for a tester role versus hiring, say, 10 years ago, are there still common skills or common traits that you look for, or are there new ones that maybe, weren't necessarily things that you were looking for 10 years ago?
I always look for people who are curious and who have good communication and organizational skills, especially coming in at entry level or lower level. That's all I need. If all you need is to be able to think critically and organize your thoughts and be able to communicate what it is you're doing. And you can kind of push beyond and grow. And I don't remember who had said it, but like being able to see and help kind of foster that development in engineers is fantastic. And it's one of the things that I really, really love in doing the work that I do.
I love the idea of moving away from technical, are you technical or not? And part of me thinks, we're all delivering these custom solutions, and what Dee Dee does in her work and Merritt does in her work, they're maybe equally technical. How do you compare those two levels of technical? And so often what I'll do in my interviews is I'll ask, and I'll tell the candidate this too, like, I don't have a right answer here to this question I'm about to ask. I just want to know how you're thinking about things. And I'll say something like, tell me how you might approach testing the soda machine at Moe's, right? I don't think it's necessary to have it all solved, but I want to hear considerations for, well, what's the change? Did we change something in the screen, or are we changing the form and function? And so when the tester starts asking me those questions, I'm like, yes, this is going to be fun. And that, and it becomes that dialogue around what are we doing? And then I like to talk strategies. So how do you, and this is something I think we've grown up and matured as a software quality assurance industry. We now have some standards, and there's tooling focused on what software testers do. Like, we all know about test plans and tests, and there's some general thinking around test automation. And I look for those skills as part of it, but that first question about, like, tell me how you approach a problem, it definitely reigns supreme. So what you write in your resume might be specific around my industry and about, and me personally, I might look for sort of traits about this person. Do they make something on their own? Do they have a club or a focus area that they're highly motivated in? But more specifically, it's about that pattern of approach to test.
I like that. Yeah, it's I remember from my own interviews at Microsoft, there's always the Microsoft logic question, which was something goofy and ridiculous. They were much, hated by everyone. But the thing that I liked about it is that when you're evaluating the answers to those questions, nobody cares if you get the right answer. They just want to hear how you think through it, and can you talk about how you think through it. And I think that I always appreciated that. Of course, the interviewer, has a lot of control over how that all plays out, but but I think it's important, right? We're always looking for folks who are thoughtful, I think, in testing. So yeah, I think it's interesting. I wanted to harken back to some of the things you were saying about being women in this role, and sometimes being kept there. I'm struggling for words on this, but I'm wondering if there's maybe, what's the best piece of advice that you've received, I would say, as a tester, and then does it differ, but your best advice as a female in tech? Margie.
Write books on this. Speak up, be present in the room as a female in general in any role. make sure that you step into the room and you have presence. Learn how to speak truth to power and to do it appropriately. Study the different temperaments of different people so you understand how to deliver a message in the way they can best receive it. Be tenacious, but speak up, take up space in a room. And I learned years ago, I used to go to this annual really great conference, and a lot of what we talked about is how to step into a room and own the room. So learn how to do that. Just do the things that make you uncomfortable. Like Myra was saying, you know, she was afraid of public speaking. So what did she do more of? Public speaking. So do the things you're afraid of, because in QA, whether it was in the 80s or whether it's now, you're very oftentimes not delivering great news. You're not saying, oh, everything works perfectly. Your software is brilliant. I love the UI. There are no problems here. No, this is not your message. So you have to learn, you have to like grow yourself, read the books on the different temperaments, learn the different ways you have to communicate. You have to be one of the best communicators in the room. Not that other people do not, but you have to be, that's got to be a strength. Yeah.
Didi, I think you were about to say something.
Yeah, I would say like the best advice for me was when I always thought about like mentor, mentee, and I grew up always making sure I had a mentor, and I used to make sure I paid for it by having mentees. But what I think that helped me the most is having a sponsor. So my advice for anyone like on my team or anyone that's looking to grow in their career is making sure you have a sponsor that's a few levels above you, because they will look out for you. So whatever company you end up working with, or if you're starting your own thing, having a sponsor is you need enough people who don't look like you to advocate for you. And I think that being a Black female in tech, that helped me a lot. So I would go and look for white men that were a few levels above me, that could get to know me, learn how I work, and who could advise me on different, things that I would run into. I thought that that was extremely helpful.
There's an element of positive and negative feedback. I mean, I think we've all gotten a fair amount of both, right? And maybe some things, some well-meaning advice, a lot like, don't make waves, just be cool. Those sort of minimizing things are not pieces of advice I would want to receive again. I love what Margie said, and I would want to sort of echo that and say, walk with your power. As a woman in technology, you can't be constantly thinking about what the men in the room are thinking, because there's many more of them than there are of me in that room. So being consumed with that thought process overwhelms the actual problem solving that I need to be doing. So putting all of that aside, checking it at the door, and focusing on the positive feedback you get is going to be better time spent.
Mara, what's your favorite piece of advice?
I think my favorite piece is one where there's the saying that when one door closes, another one opens. So at some point, you will feel that this is not your place anymore. And that's not a bad thing, that's an opportunity. You have only one life, and there's a gazillion places that you can spend that life in. So kind of look at for those opportunities. So it's always out there.
Great advice. I love that.
Yeah. Corinne, what about you?
It's a really hard one, and I think everybody's pretty well summarized.
Yeah.
There's a level of being yourself and in confidence in who you are, and knowing that you can do the job that you're there for, and be confident in yourself.
Yours. I know this is a question that I was hoping to get to that came in from the audience, and I'll read it verbatim, but how do you feel about the range of job titles and descriptions now in quality, right? QA, QE, SDET. Do you feel that this is fragmentation and is maybe a bad thing? Or do you think that this is a effort at specialization and is maybe a good thing? I'm I always say I'm a tester, and I can work in various modes, depending on the situation or whatnot. But Mart, I know you write a lot about kinds of perceptions and things of testing, and I'm wondering, do you have any thoughts on that? And does this differ in Europe? I'm curious about that too.
I don't know actually if it differs in Europe. Maybe the other folks in the call can tell that. But at least around here, the title you use for recruiting is not the title you end up having in your company. The one you choose for recruiting is a reference for kind of what type of a person you're primarily looking for. So we use the software development, engineering, test type of titles when we want to emphasize the programming aspect of things. And yet when those people start their jobs, depending on the level of automation in the company at that point, they might find themselves no automation whatsoever in the first 6 months. So kind of like, it's setting the expectation of where the future should take you. That's more of what we use. And the different titles, they refer as kind of like, this team will need these competencies. So when we want to seek someone who is really strong at test design and creative ideas on how things might break, because we don't have those skills, then we use more of the tester type of titles. And then we have the conversation in the company on like, what are we actually going to call all of you? And there's a huge argument, kind of like, can it be anything, or are we all going to be called one? And that's just how it works.
Margie, what about you?
Seen these titles evolve, and I have a fairly strong position on them. I don't think quality should be in the equation. And I heard this from a very famous pioneer in the engineering industry. I used to go to a conference every single year with this guy, Gerald Weinberg. And y'all should look him up if you don't know who he is already and read his books, because it's timeless information. But we can't assure quality. That comes from a manufacturing term many years ago. We don't come in, we don't have a magic wand. We can't test quality into your product. We could test your product, but we cannot test quality into it. So the whole concept of QA engineer, QA quality assurance, I think gives people the illusion that we can do something that is not possible to be done. We can only show light in the areas of the product that need work, but we can't infuse quality into the product. So I try to talk to HR departments and be like, what are you trying to hire for? What do you need this person to do? So I much prefer these. I'm a software tester. I test software, but I can't just like quality,
If only.
It's just such, I'm not a quality fairy. I can't just be like, here you go, quality, we test it, it's quality now. So I think we need to really work with our HR departments and just take that term completely out, because it came from manufacturing, where you have quality in the line, and that is important, and you must have that, otherwise your wheels on your car will fall off or whatever. But it's very different than what we do. Software testing is very different. So I think it shouldn't be on any job descriptions at all.
I love the quality, the capital Q quality, because it gives me leverage to do, well, that's just an area of quality. It's such a soft thing that it gives you latitude to do a whole lot more than I need to write tests and run tests, like silo. So actually, I don't object to it that extreme, but I do think we're in this pendulum of embedded quality to the customers will test it. There are no testers, they're all dev testing. And we keep swinging back and forth like we do in other areas. I like to use the analyst versus the automation focus in the titles. And I think the title, I hate the idea of the title being the one thing that you're allowed to do, but giving guidance to what's expected of you and what other people can expect from you. But outside of that, I think all of those things, like if you see any of those titles in there, I would imagine applying for that role as me. So I identify with all of them. I don't know that it's as important.
Makes sense. We are getting near to the end, and I have two more questions that I want to ask, and this other one is from the audience too. And if anybody wants to answer this one, please feel free to speak up. Thinking on topics of diversity and inclusion, how do we make sure that we're getting good diversity in our teams? I think, some of that is, how the company recruits or whatever, but as individuals, sort of how do you make sure that you have diverse perspectives on your teams?
Diversity and inclusion is definitely very dear to my heart because it's usually just me. But I feel like you have to go where people don't look like you, right? So if you want to hire more Black engineers or Mexican or Latino engineers, you have to go to areas where you see more of them. So I'm a big advocate of like going to HBCUs, and if it's engineering, if it's that you're looking for, whatever that specialty is, like do your research and find out those schools that specialize in that particular area. And then like if you want to get more Hispanic individuals in, right, go to schools that the ratio is larger in that area. And also if it's not new college hires that you're looking for, go to different like groups. We all have so many different organizations that specialize in particular areas. Like I'm a part of National Society of Black Engineers. So I tap into National Society of Black Engineers if I'm trying to help and leverage and get more of a diverse team. But a lot of times I see if it's a team of male, it's all male. If it's a team of women, it's mostly women. And you look at the leadership, if the leadership is Indian, most of the team is all Indian. If it's a Black leader, then you may have a few more Black people on there. So all of us naturally gravitate to those that are like us. And we just need to be honest about that and make sure we hire a diverse team so that now you have your Asians going and bringing in more Asians, your Indians bringing in more Indian, your white bringing in more white or male, so just being honest about that. And a lot of people are just using that word, but they're not really putting any action to it. That's why you're finding a lot of turnover in a lot of companies that have a diversity and inclusion team, because the hiring managers are not partnering with them to actually improve diversity and inclusion. They're just still going to their same network. Nothing is changing.
Yeah, and as a leader in the company, we have to be making strides to make it level. So when I came into my organization and I looked at my staffing, I was like, is this equitable pay for equitable work? And being responsible to that as a leader in that group, and making sure that it's fair, and making sure that you're not comparing, right? Like we said, technical to technical, they're doing different work, but really the appreciation and the value shouldn't be so dramatic between a Black, white, and male, female sort of breakdown. It should be equitable and paying attention to that.
Thank you.
Final
question. Oh, sorry, Margie. I had lag.
There's one thing we did. We started this in the 80s because we had a really diverse group. So we've been doing this, and I learned from some of my friends who are no longer with us, sadly, but really intentionally, we were targeting colleges, historically Black colleges and universities, where you have to go to where the diverse people are. You have to make an intentional effort to go. Exactly what she said. If you're going to recruit, there is definitely a bias, like me bias, but you have to get beyond that, and you have to go and make an effort to find people that are very different, come from different backgrounds, different nationalities. It has to be completely intentional. Doesn't just happen.
That's true. Thinking about our final question, right, where the topic is about career opportunities. So oftentimes we're, in a junior role and we're looking for that next level up, or we're in, a mid-level senior role and we're looking to, maybe become a manager or a lead or something like that. I'm wondering if we could just kind of go around, and if you have a piece of advice for, how do you grow from that junior to that intermediate role? And then how do you take the next step from that intermediate onto wherever else you might be? Does anybody want to go first?
I feel like number one, to advocate for yourself and to speak up. I think that we look to our manager to just make that opportunity for us and understand where we want to grow. But a lot of times, maybe you've said it and maybe you've explained it to them, but they didn't hear you. So just make sure in your performance reviews that you're actually open and honest about, hey, I want to grow and become a manager, or my next level, I want to be a director. These are the reasons why, and asking for that piece of advice, asking for what do I need to improve on? What do I need to do more of to get to that next level? So being vocal about it. I don't think we're vocal enough about really what we want to do. We're just assuming that other people are going to figure it out and just make the next opportunity happen for us.
I think my words are similar in the sentiment. Set your own goals, write them down and show them to your manager so that you can agree on things that you drive. And remember that your career is too important to be left on a random manager that you got assigned. It's your career, so drive it.
Great advice.
Mine is keep your head in the game. I have it written up on a board for myself because it's so easy to get. I need the reminder, stay engaged, stay engaged. I think the people who excel and move forward are the ones who are curious, keep their mindset present, are listening and responding. And I agree with what both of these ladies have said. More specifically, I mean, not to the extent of like wearing yourself out and working 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., but to the level of like, I'm in a meeting, I can stay focused on the goal and of the discussion and get to the end of it. And that presence of mind and represents your ability to be, to move forward in any project.
Margie, Kareem?
I feel like really it's been said, it's your career is your responsibility. So you can use your manager to help figure out where you want to go, but you need to have the drive. You need to take classes to pick up things on the others, outside of work, which is hard to do in the high pressure that we work in, but pick up classes, learn new things, partner with your manager and show your manager that you're driving and you have the interest, and they're just there to help you on that path. They're your navigator.
Awesome.
I got into management by looking at gaps and filling them, and also watching what my managers did or what they didn't like to do. But it was always find a gap and fill it, see what they're doing and say, hey, I can take that off your hands if you want. And just taking on, like really acting in the role. So it's natural evolution to get the different roles that I got, but just taking on more and more different responsibilities. Because all you need to do is really just keep your eyes open, see what everybody's doing, see what isn't getting done, find problems and solve them. Just be a problem solver. I guarantee you there are things your manager is doing today that they don't want to be doing. So take on a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, and eventually they'll be like, why aren't you doing this? But really own it. So you can say what you want to do, but you have to start doing what you want to do. They're not just going to say, oh, here's an opportunity for you necessarily. You gotta be doing what it is you say you want to do. Be about it. Don't just talk about it, and then it will be natural. And if where you're at, if they won't promote you, then there's hundreds of thousands of jobs in this country and across the world in software that are going unfilled today. So just take it. It's your career. Take it.
Yeah, I often say, live the life you want. Right? Just start stepping into that role and start living it.
Yeah, start doing it. You don't need any more education generally. You don't need any more information. If you've been around for a little bit in a particular role, start doing their stuff, and they'll be like, thank you. One less thing for me. Usually, not always.
But I think like we started off this talk, right? Sometimes it's about having the right conversation, and having that right conversation often involves putting yourself out there a little bit and being a little vulnerable, taking a risk. And I think sometimes when you do that, sure, a door slams on your face, but wherever a door closes, right? Sometimes a window opens up. I think we got some great advice from all of you today, and I hope the audience is inspired. I hope this is actionable for them. I would encourage anybody who's watching this panel, find these wonderful women on LinkedIn or somewhere, and take a look at their careers. Maybe there's some inspiration that you can derive from that. Thank you all so much for joining us, and I feel like I'm a better person now. Thank you.